Mr. Tim Gocher, Chairman of Dolma Fund, prominent members of media world, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Nepal's long desired goal of concluding the peace process and promulgating a new democratic constitution is about to be fulfilled. While recently Nepal has made a significant stride in its peace process, the country is all set to give a new democratic republic constitution before 28 May this year. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Nepal is likely to enter into a new era of socio-economic and political transformation. In this context, I would like to acknowledge here the important role being played by our international friends, including the United Kingdom, by providing invaluable support to Nepal's endeavors towards peace, modernization and social advancement. As at this specific juncture of her history, economic well-being is crucial. Nepal is now committed to achieve steady economic growth in order to help improve the general living standards of her population. To achieve this objective, Nepal needs foreign investment, technology as well as skill. To create conducive environment for foreign direct investment in Nepal, Nepal has already enacted a number of legislation including the Competition Act, Insolvency Act, New Company Act, Cyber Act, Foreign Investment and Technology Transfer Act, besides being a party to the World Bank promoted Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency (MIGA). These arrangements are aimed at promoting and protecting foreign investment in Nepal and facilitate repatriation of investors' profit. Perhaps many of you know that Nepal has one of the most liberal foreign investment regimes in the whole South Asia region, in the form of favorable environment for business and foreign investors. The government of Nepal granted permission to 1,431 foreign investment projects in 2008 alone, with the total project cost of Nepali rupees 114 billion. Likewise, in fiscal year 2009 and 10, the government gave approval for the incorporation of 171 joint ventures with foreign investment equivalent to Nepali rupees 9.1 billion. In addition, the government of Nepal has of late set up a national investment board to facilitate foreign investors and had also declared year 2012 and 13 as the Nepal investment year, again with a view to promote foreign investment into different priority sectors. It is imperative to say, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, that Nepal is an attractive investment destination, not just due to its policy measures and her untapped abundant natural resources, but also because of her strategic location between two soaring economies of the world, that is China and India. Nepal's location offers an ideal setting for foreign investors interested to do business in these countries, since Nepali products enjoy an easy access to these big markets. Given China and India's regional and intra-regional initiatives to connect neighbors through various measures such as railways and Asian highways and sheer prosperity in the region, Nepal's location undeniably offers strategic value to the international investors. Moreover, availability of English-speaking yet comparatively cheap labor force and expanding facilities of the information technology make the Himalayan nation much more investment-friendly land. Needless to say here that Nepal herself is a good market for foreign goods and services, as some 6 million people belonging to the middle and higher income groups have spending capacity of about 7 billion GBP per annum. With this backdrop, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to host the launching of the Dolma Impact Fund as the first such event during the Nepal investment year in the United Kingdom. Dolma Impact Fund, as I understand, embraces the new spirit of commerce combined with the goal of alleviating poverty. We are honored that this team of internationally renowned experts in finance, business, politics and academia is committed to promote private international capital to help more business in Nepal. I am sure it is going to be a win-win situation for both of us. On behalf of the Nepalese Embassy, I would like to assure every possible help to your endeavors in the future. I would also like to register my sincere appreciation and thanks to all those involved with Dolma Development Fund for supporting education, health and other sectors in remote parts of Nepal and aid in partnership with local communities over the last 9 years. Last but not the least, I would once like to thank you all for being with us this evening. I now call upon one of the experts in the Dolma Impact Fund team, Mr. David Grigson, for a few words. In addition to his affiliation with the Dolma Impact Fund, David is chairman of Trinity Mirror Public Limited Company and Creston Public Limited Company, as well as non-executive director at the Standard Life of Ocado. He was formerly the CFO of Writer Public Limited Company. We are indeed delighted to have him with us this evening. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard one of the two most important speeches here today. You're going to hear the other one in a minute from Tim Gocher, and I don't intend to keep you from listening to what Tim has to say. The ambassador has very kindly introduced me and told you a little bit about what I do. I'm a non-executive director. I'm interested in ensuring that public companies in this country have the very best governance, and it was for that reason that Tim invited me to be part of the Dolma Impact Fund. I've known Tim for 5 or 6 years. In 2006, when I was at Reuters, I was wondering about what I wanted to do in my afterlife beyond being an executive, and certainly looking around for things that I could feel really enthusiastic and passionate about. And a fellow director of mine, somebody I think a number of you in this room know, Mr. Chalise, introduced me to Tim. Tim told me about what he was doing in Nepal at that time, mainly associated with education, sustainability and ecotourism, and I thought this sounded absolutely fascinating. We then had a wonderful trip to Nepal. It was my first, as I'll explain in a minute. I know Southeast Asia well, but this was my first trip to Nepal. It was full of adventure. Not least me cutting my knee open on a razor blade 5 minutes after entering my hotel, and then trekking around the mountains, hobbling with a stick and plenty of support. Involved helicopter rides where the helicopter refused to leave the ground, and the only reason for the helicopter is because I couldn't walk anywhere. The helicopter refused to leave the ground because we were all so heavy. So the pilot decided the only way he could get it to fly was to throw it off the edge of the mountain, which was a very hair-raising moment. We had some very interesting and exciting times, and I thoroughly enjoyed the trip. Of course, what made me enjoy it more than anything else was just the stunning scenery. You see pictures of it here, and the fabulous people, many of whom, or a lot of whom are in the room today too, and you get a kind of real flavour for that. When Tim asked me to step up and become involved in Dolma Impact, I didn't need a minute to think about it before saying yes. Tim not only has this fabulous passion for Nepal, but he's a brilliantly capable guy. He's as straight as anybody. He fundamentally believes in sustainable investment, and the Impact Fund is absolutely up his street. For those who know him, I think you'll know that this fund is in excellent hands. He'll lead it extraordinarily well, and we all hope and pray, but also have a very high expectation of his success. As I said a minute ago, the subcontinent means a lot to me. I was brought up in Sri Lanka, born in Sri Lanka, brought up there. I have a house there. I've travelled extensively around India, Sri Lanka and other parts of the subcontinent. I've seen what sustainable development investment can do for a country, for its people, for its prosperity, for its sustainability. And I've seen as well, as the ambassador said, the benefits of having both China and India on your borders. They are phenomenally powerful, large markets, deep pockets, willing to invest in their neighbouring countries. And it seems to me that Nepal is hugely and brilliantly strategically placed to take advantage of that. I also have an affection, mainly I think through my time at Reuters, where I was a chief financial officer for 10 years, for businesses that have very high ethical values. As you know, Reuters is a global news agency. To many parts of the world, for many, many, many years, Reuters was the only source of truth that those countries could find. They couldn't rely on anything that was being published locally by virtue of, obviously, their governments wanting or controlling the kind of mouthpieces of the news media. We in the UK don't appreciate how important that is. At Reuters, we genuinely felt we were a force for good in the world as well as a commercial operation. I do believe that you can join those things together and make a success of both of them. Recently, I've taken on the chairmanship of Trinity Mirror, and of course we all are reading a lot in the press in this country about press ethics. We're reading a lot about the Lebanese inquiry, and we're seeing a lot of very unsavory practices coming to the fore, involving the police, involving politicians, involving journalists, using pretty dodgy practices to get hold of news stories. I don't think the press needs to behave that way. I don't think media needs to behave that way. I don't think Trinity Mirror has been behaving that way, but I certainly intend to put ethics really high on my agenda when I'm chairman of that company. And it's partly for that reason, that affection with ethical standards, my affection for Southeast Asia, my absolutely belief in Tim, that I'm involved in the Dolma Impact Fund, and I hope many of you will, as a result of this event, get close to it as well and be involved too. But the main man is waiting in front of me to come and talk to you about it, so let me please introduce to you Tim Gocher.
Well, thank you, David. Your kind words, I'm sure I didn't deserve most of them, but thank you very much indeed. Your Excellency, thank you for hosting this event, and I think your support and the support of the Embassy speaks volumes for what Nepal is trying to do in the world now in terms of foreign direct investment and support of private business. Thank you all of you for coming. It's wonderful to see so many friends, old colleagues, ex-colleagues I should say. Obviously tonight I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Dolma Development Fund. I don't want to keep you too long between us and the authentic Nepali cuisine. We've tried to add a little Nepali tinge to the evening with the cookery beer, with the food, etc. And I hope you enjoy the little beautiful bags of tea which came recently from Nepal. So before we get into the Dolma Impact Fund, I'm going to get something out of the way here. Most of you have seen me hobbling around on a crutch. So that I don't have to explain this 80 times later on this evening, I thought I'd be a bit more proactive and explain it up front. So 2 months ago, I was in Nepal, merrily climbing the mountains, wandering through the rhododendron forests of the Himalayas, and I tripped, and I twisted my ankle, and I broke it. Now, at least it was in Nepal. It's better than slipping in the bath. At least it's an exciting story. But there I was, halfway up a mountain, nowhere to land a helicopter, and I've got to descend 1,000 meters to get to the nearest road. So how the hell am I going to get down? And just as we were discussing this with some local villagers, a guy came along with what he said was the local ambulance service. Now, is Vinay from Acumen Fund here tonight? Excellent, wonderful. Hello, Vinay. Now, I thought this was highly relevant to the impact investment industry because Acumen Fund, one of the pioneers in the impact investing space, invested in a very successful business in Mumbai for affordable ambulance services. So, Vinay, this is for you. We actually got some footage of the Himalayan ambulance as a business idea for us and Acumen combined. This is my rather ignominious exit from... that's about it. So Vinay, we'll talk about a JV later, okay? Excellent. So back to the Dolma Impact Fund, and I'm going to stand without my crutch, and I hope it doesn't hurt too much. I wonder what brought us all here today. I know that some of us are from, the NGO world, some of us are from foundations, some of them are from private investors. But I think all of us want to improve human prosperity, especially in the developing world, especially where low-income communities need that most. And we've seen this wonderful growth of impact investment, and I've watched it closely over the last couple of years. And I wanted to tell you what brought me here specifically, what brought me to start the Dolma Development Fund. And it started with a trip in 2003, when Nepal was still in civil war. And I was in a difficult time in my own life. And I remember looking at a map and thinking, where's the furthest place in the world I can get from London? Because I've got to get out of here. I need a break. And I looked at the map and I saw the peaks of the Himalayas poking out at me, and I thought, Nepal, that's about as good as I can get. So off I trotted, and it was the middle of the monsoon, and we made it up to the Langtang district, and I found myself trapped by the paths being washed away in a small village of about 200 ethnic Tibetan peoples close to the border. And I just wanted to stay there. They were the most incredible people I had met. Some of the friendliest, some of the happiest, some of the most peaceful people that I've ever met. Also very industrious people, and they made me so warm. Their effortless hospitality was astonishing. And I realized at the time I was working at E.ON, the energy firm, helping to launch one of their renewable energy businesses. And I found it quite ironic that these people, these ancient people, had been living a sustainable lifestyle, living within the means of the land which they were given. And it's something that we're all striving to do. The mistakes that the West has made, we're now trying to make up for them by renewables through, combating climate change. But if we hadn't made the mistakes in the first place, like these villagers, we wouldn't be in this situation today. And I found it quite ironic that we talk about the sort of development spectrum with the West at the top and people in poor villages earning less than $100 a year at the bottom, whereas in fact they were teaching me something. And that, I've looked at the world with a different view since that moment, and I've realized the total equality of mankind, and particularly what those people taught me. And I'd like you to meet some of those people. This is all for those that have been to Nepal or those who are Nepali. These are people from the Langtang region. They're either ethnically Tamang or they're Tibetan. And I think you can see here, what I found, a mixture of real cultural pride and, of course, poverty. And, as I got to know these people, I even learned the language fairly poorly, which always gives them a laugh. And I realized that, there was much that I could do while they taught me a lot. But what they really needed was teaching, they needed education, they needed basic healthcare. And I'm not a medical man, and I'm certainly not a teacher. What I know and knew was business and investment. And so I thought, why don't we start investing in some businesses? And I thought about raising money, and I thought that's impossible. It's the middle of a civil war. So we're going to have to form a charity, and we're going to invest through that. And it was, of course, it wasn't called it at the time, but it was impact investment. And it was really stimulated by me. By the way, you might notice one hybrid Essex boy Tibetan chap down here, which is me. That's a crazy night. It really started back in 2003. I met one particular girl from one village, and her name was Dolma. And this is Dolma. And I wanted to sponsor Dolma for education, which I did. But instead of doing that directly, I set up the Dolma Development Fund, which is a UK charity. And the Dolma Development Fund's mandate was to invest in promising local businesses, particularly which are community-led, which can bring benefit socially, economically, environmentally to the communities. And the first business we launched was Dolma Ecotourism, which creates a unique cultural adventure. It's a community-driven trip in the northern part of Nepal, near the border of Tibet, the same place I went at first. And it really is unique because the people are so intimate, because it's their business. And so we've invested in the facilities and the marketing, and that's become very successful in its own right. And from there, with some of those profits and donations from other people, we were able to sponsor children, we were able to help with healthcare programs, and this of course is sustainable. This isn't just charity, although there are some donations, but this is effectively sustainable business. This is impact investment. And once we had quite a lot of kids at school, we were able to specialize a little more. And two children I'd like to introduce you to, which I think are the epitome of what we are now trying to do, now that I have the pleasure of going there frequently and meeting and knowing most of these children. This is Kamu. She's 19. She's from a small village. Her family is extremely poor, but she's extremely bright. And she will graduate this year with a distinction in the O-level equivalent and enter technical college, which is a feeder college, to be a doctor. And we have all faith in her meeting that. Now, I hope you can appreciate that there is nobody in her community of about 10,000 people who has a degree, let alone being a doctor. Now, we are committed to helping Kamu become a doctor, and we're sure that she will do so. I'd also like to introduce you to Pemba. She's 8, and she's going to learn to talk. She has a hearing problem which was never diagnosed, and in impoverished families in Nepal, those people are often seen as a burden to the family. They're an economic burden. And yet with a hearing aid now, she's at speech therapy and she's learning well, and we hope that in time she will join a normal school. And this is the kind of impact that we've been able to create. It's real lives, it's real people. Now, there are 3 converging trends which have taken us from the Dolma Development Fund, a charity, to the launch of the Dolma Impact Fund, which is why we're all here today. And I'd like to talk you through those trends. The first is the Dolma Development Fund's own success. It's a small charity, but here are a couple of the projects that we've invested in. I've already mentioned Dolma Ecotourism. Again, a fairly small investment, but a very healthy rate of return. But we've impacted a community of many thousand. We've brought hundreds of thousands of dollars into one of the poorest communities in Nepal, indeed in the world. And we've brought hundreds of tourists, and we've shined a spotlight on a particular area of Nepal and trained hundreds of people while making money. Yes, it's possible. Similarly, the Highland Boarding School, a school close by to where we run the tours, was actually becoming overburdened with the number of people we were able to send to school. And so we invested in expanding the facilities, especially the hostel facilities for poorer children from the mountain regions who live too far away to walk to school. And again, a healthy financial return and a fantastic social return. The second trend that led us to today's announcement is that Nepal is doing damn well. Now, 2006 is when the peace accord was signed, and since then we've seen the peace dividend of economic growth kicking off. Now, as you can see, it's a higher growth rate than Pakistan, but it's not up there yet with India and Bangladesh. But with the open borders and the trade agreements, which His Excellency referred to, we believe that it's inevitable that economic convergence will continue with India and economic growth will continue. I'd also just like to point out that Nepal is the highest rural percentage country in South Asia, but it's also the fastest urbanizing country, according to a World Bank report I read last week, which is both wonderful from investment opportunities, but it's also terrifying, if anyone's been to Kathmandu, to think that this is the fastest urbanizing country because the infrastructure isn't there. But again, this is where the opportunities for investment are taking place. Also on the issue of the economy is the FDI. Now, with an average rate growing at 27% per year since 2006, since the peace accord was signed, we've seen incredible investments, notably more than 50% more than 50% FDI growth average per year for those 6 years from China and India. And this is significant not just for the investment in the economy of Nepal, but it's significant to create exit channels for investments made into Nepal. So when you're trying to exit your Nepali company and these Indian and these Chinese corporations have already been investing for a few years, you have a direct channel to exit. And that's something that wasn't there certainly before the peace accord. And they're doing extremely well, as the ambassador said, and we recently saw an announcement of 1.6 billion to tap the incredible hydropower potential of Nepal, which is way more than Nepal actually needs. And so why couldn't Nepal become the Saudi Arabia of clean tech for South Asia? And this is what groups like the Chinese investor, but it's just another example of the flourishing foreign investment situation. The third trend, which led us to our announcement, is the growth of impact funds in South Asia. Now, we've done a study which is slightly broader than impact. We've chosen to also capture private developmental funds. They may not follow the exact impact metrics, but they are people like Avishkar, Pragati, people who have raised serious sums of money to invest in rural poor or in low-income communities. This excludes microfinance, by the way, but we found 2.3 billion of committed capital in the South Asia region. It's no surprise that the vast majority of that goes to India, but it was somewhat of a surprise that 2 of those funds were in Pakistan, 2 in Bangladesh, and 1 each funded by CDC, part of the British government. And it might be also interesting to look at our impact capital per capita in poverty. That is the amount of dollars spent by these funds, the amount of dollars able to be committed by these funds on people living under $1.25 a day. And you can see India and Pakistan, you can see Bangladesh catching up, but where is Nepal? Of 192 investment funds supporting small growing businesses in emerging markets, according to the IFC, exactly 0 were in Nepal. Now, we think that the economic growth, we think that our own experience, we think that the growth of investment funds in the region has led us to this decision to launch the Dolma Impact Fund, which we're formally announcing today. The fund targets 20 to 40 million, which is a small fund, but we would rather start small, set a fairly low targeted rate of return, which I know puts us in a particular range of capital for a particular type of more patient capital, and we're doing that intentionally. The investment size will be around $500,000 to a cap of 3 million per investment. Particularly, as well as investing in capital, it's essential that we invest in technology and in management skills, because if we came along today with this fund and tried to source the technology and the management skills locally, you simply couldn't deploy the capital. You wouldn't be able to scale those businesses. And so I'm going to talk a little further on about how we're going to do that. But we're also committed to providing social and environmental reporting. We're working with a group called Shujog in Singapore, which is doing that for us based on some of the established impact investment metrics. Our first close is due in October 2012. We are already in significant discussions with some of the DFIs, but today is really about opening it up to the broader market. And I'm very interested in the reaction. We've got people from JP Morgan in the room, we've got people from NGOs in the room, and I'm very interested in the reaction from the different types of capital as we open up this process. But please don't think for a minute that this is going to overshadow the Dolma Development Fund. Indeed, it's going to stimulate its growth. Through a share of the carried interest in the management company, the Dolma Development Fund will be perfectly aligned with the profits of the Dolma Impact Fund to continue and grow its philanthropic mandate in education, in healthcare, and continuing in impact investment funds that would never make any kind of a market return. So that's a bit about the country and a bit about what led us to this decision, but let's scratch a bit beneath the macro picture and let's get a bit more granularity on what these business opportunities are in the country. First, a lot of people say that, oh, there's just a shortage of capital in Nepal. Well, that's just not true. The purple line, the steep hill there, is the number of registered financial institutions in Nepal. If I plotted the credit availability, which has grown at 17% on average over the last 6 years, it would look much the same. So credit has been growing, but where's that credit been invested? The line at the top is the total consumption of GDP, running at 90%. The line at the bottom, perhaps even more informatively, is the gross fixed capital formation, which is the amount of value added to the fixed assets in a country. And the growth of that. And as you can see, both of those are static. Consumption is extremely high, about the same rate as the UK, I must say. But the gross fixed capital formation is not benefiting from this capital. What you're looking at here is a housing bubble, a consumer bubble, credit which is funding poorly funded investments by consumers. And two of the most promising industries, let's take agriculture and tourism, took almost 3% each, which is a tiny amount of that loan portfolio. SMEs, the area which we're passionate about, took only 1.2% of that loan portfolio. And so the credit is going into unproductive areas. Perhaps worse, the credit is only going into Kathmandu. The large bar there is the central area, which includes Kathmandu. 64% of the total loans go to 13% of the population. And so we're seeing a very poor distribution, which again is an opportunity to move capital into other parts. But the reason that we're so passionate about SMEs are, pretty much everybody says, we can argue about the statistics, but what does it do for an economy? Well, a recent study has said that for every dollar invested in an SME, it generates an additional $12 in the local economy. More importantly, 72% of new jobs generated in SMEs go to unskilled or semi-skilled workers. Now, in Nepal, there's a range of figures from 18% the official and 46% by the CIA. But let's say, suffice to say, there is a very high unemployment rate in Nepal, and this is just the kind of investment, the kind of economically productive investment that the country needs. And of course, we're a growth fund. We're a equity, or certainly a risk capital hybrid growth fund, which is aligned with the upside of businesses. Not like a debt fund, which is obviously aligned with preserving the downside. We're about boosting the upside to boost our returns. And all of our incentives are linked to that. And so it is funds like us that will invest in the technology and the skills able to boost that growth and not just pay down existing debt. So again, let's get a bit more granular. So what we find now is a country which has got plenty of credit, but almost no SME capital at all. It's a country of increasing prosperity, increasing disposable income, increasing basic needs like healthcare and water and agriculture. And these are not being met currently by the government due to a lack of budget and the problems which the country has been through. And so we're seeing incredible price inflation on various aspects of the economy, where the SMEs are simply not capable because they don't have the capital, technology and skills to benefit. And so we're seeing a huge sucking in of products from India and China to meet the deficits. Let me give you some examples. In healthcare, 72% of expenditure on healthcare is private. The prices are going up dramatically. The public only spends less than $3 per person per year on healthcare. And so there's an enormous pent-up demand, particularly for companies which can scale and take medicine out to the rural areas where they couldn't afford a doctor, they certainly couldn't afford a health post or a hospital. But through telemedicine and other communications, these can be spread out at a low cost and still make a profit. And we're working on a couple of such projects which are currently in our immediate pipeline. With water, less than half of people have access to safe drinking water. Incredibly, when I was there, people were telling me that in Kathmandu, for only 2 hours a day, at fairly unpredictable times, you get the mains water on. So everybody runs along with their buckets and, of course, fills it up for the rest of the day. But, what has this done? And actually, urban pipe access has decreased over the last 7 years by 10%, which is phenomenal. So the government water company are not able to take up the slack, and a private water tank sells at 70 times per litre what the water from the mains costs. And that is a classic example of crazy price inflation because there isn't an SME market in Nepal. And so, again, this is an area which we're working in. In sanitation, there are 32 public toilets in Kathmandu, of which only 16 still work. I don't know how old that data is, and maybe it's even worse. And so, again, whether it was Acumen or somebody else, there's been a very successful public toilet and shower pay-per-use model which we would like to bring into the country. With agriculture, almost 4 million people still live in food insecurity, and the inflation of food is running at 3.2% above CPI. Now, CPI in Nepal is currently 7.5, that's price inflation, currently 7.5%, but did run above 11% a couple of years ago. And so you're seeing up to sort of 15% price increases per year on average food and beverages. So again, we see a lot of, particularly in dairy, we have one in the immediate pipeline, which we're working on. In education, 38% of people pass in a public school, 85% of people pass in a private school. Guess what? Everybody wants their kids to go to private school. And so that has pushed up the price. And we've invested successfully in a school and expanded the facilities. And we're going to do that to a hell of a lot more with the Dolma Impact Fund, profitably. Off-grid renewables. There are up to 16 hours a day of power cuts in Kathmandu at the moment. And people are buying generators and highly expensive diesel and gas solutions for this. Incredible energy inflation. It's a perfect market for off-grid renewables, both in urban, which can provide scale to these companies, but also in rural. It's also a prime solar area and a prime, certainly with the amount of hydro capacity, a prime area for that. And of course, energy increases almost all variables of social and environmental impact. With tele and mobile banking, 40% only have access to formal financial services currently. But internet growth, and particularly mobile penetration, already above 50%, it's growing at almost 50% a year. And very interestingly, 93% of people using the internet use it through their mobile. Now that gives us a wonderful opportunity to distribute mobile banking, insurance, financially inclusive products to that 60%, which has no access to banking or insurance products. And again, we're working on one particular project to invest in, which is in our immediate pipeline. And finally, culture, including ecotourism and craft, something that's near and dear to my heart, is growing phenomenally well with the peace dividend, but there are critical investments which need to be made in the infrastructure, in lodges, in eco-lodges, etc. And there are a couple of projects which we are looking to invest in immediately. But probably the most common question that I'm asked is, Nepal, isn't that a bit small? How could you raise so much money and deploy that successfully in a country of 29 million people with the sort of GDP per capita that you can see there? And my answer to that is, the addressable market for Nepal Inc., Nepal PLC, whatever you want to call it, is absolutely enormous. Because the 5 bordering states with Indian states with Nepal alone, plus Nepal, constitute 417 million people. Nepal has effectively an open border with India. And you can see the picture at the top there. It has 22 roads and 1 rail connection with more rail connections planned. It has 4 selected border crossings which are being invested heavily in to increase the throughput as bidirectional trade increases. In fact, Nepal exports to India have increased 12-fold since 1996. But in addition to the infrastructure crossings are the trade agreements, the bilateral investment agreements, the things which strip out any of the duties which would prevent this. And having an open border with a country like India is incredible. And this is one of Nepal's great advantages. So as the ambassador said, yes, Nepal is a valid market and has high spending power in its own right. But Nepal is growing, and this is where the economic convergence of Nepal, if you look at the growth rates of the neighbouring states which are listed there, there is absolutely no reason, 0 reason, short of falling back into war, why Nepal's economy would not grow at those sort of levels over time. And so we think this is a major example, and our addressable market is to invest in companies with a direct business plan and the ability to scale out their model into at least the neighbouring states of India and, of course, in Nepal. So how are we going to address the opportunity? Hopefully I've given you some good data on what the opportunity is. Well, the Dolma Impact Fund will be established, both the fund itself and its management company, in Mauritius, which is the only country to have both bilateral tax and investment agreements with Nepal. It's a common jurisdiction also for India. And as I said, it will share a share of the carried interest with the Dolma Development Fund UK charity. It will invest directly into Nepal and will also have a group of technical advisors on the ground, which effectively is part of the management team, with funds from limited partners coming across the world. The origination and investment process is obviously important to explain, and we, particularly when it comes to origination, and we've spent at least 6 months now working these 7 channels for our origination channel. One of the most important is that banks do lend to SMEs. In fact, we're working with the ACE Development Bank, the largest development bank in Nepal, to work to convert some of its loan portfolio where it doesn't provide other types of capital. It doesn't have products for SME growth. It cannot take the kind of risk that a private equity fund can take. And so we're working with a number of large banks in Nepal who are more than happy to provide their clients with more flexible capital options. The impact investment industry has been running for years, and Acumen and a number of others across the world, India and Africa especially, have already developed solutions which are perfect for Nepal. There's no point in reinventing the wheel, and so we're talking to all those organisations about how we can JV or license companies' products into the country. Chartered accountants are the main throughput. They are the corporate financiers. There are no investment banks that we would know. In fact, there's no big 6 chartered accounting firms. There are just a handful, and we are closely working with them all to get access to pipelines, and they've already been extremely proactive in this regard. Chambers of commerce, both on the ground, and also we see lots of people here from the British American Chamber of Commerce this evening. Again, with lots of business ideas for Nepal. Donor agencies, we're working very closely with Dividend, but also with SNV and GIZ, who are moving more and more towards private sector stimulus. This is now the trend in the aid community. Away from pure charity giving, not away from it, but by trying to deploy more capital to stimulate the private sector. And so as donor agencies incubate essentially or invest their grant money in businesses, as they grow, they need investors like us to bring those companies into their full commercialization potential. Incubators and universities incubators particularly are springing up for companies which are smaller than ours, but obviously the successes from those we will take on. And also in a country like Nepal, only a fraction of our portfolio will be this, but there are 1 or 2 cases where we will need to start a business, and I will explain one of those in a minute. But as we move through the pipeline, we obviously move, it's a standard investment pipeline through the investment committee, and into our growth and impact partnership, which is our hands-on asset management program. We obviously understand that the companies in Nepal will need more hands-on management, and particularly more training, and we are there ready to do that. Just a few examples of things in the immediate pipeline. By the way, we have almost 10 million that we could invest now, and a pipeline which is multiple times that. But some of those examples in telebanking, an existing company, a very successful company, with ATM and point-of-sale terminals looking to expand into mobile banking, to use this incredible penetration and growth rate of the internet. An award-winning dairy company who's looking to do something towards the 400,000 litres every day, which is imported from India and not made locally. And so we plan to invest in their business to scale up through technology, the logistics, the distribution and the production. In healthcare, we're looking at an affordable model hospital and how we can invest in that to, again, use technology and networking to get healthcare out to the regions using that technology. Financial and consulting, this is the business which we are incubating. It's called Knowledge Bridge. And for those that know IntelliCap, which was spun off from Avishkar in India, it's very similar to that. It's a corporate finance, financial intermediary, plus management consultancy, technology implementation and outsourcing. Because this does not exist in Nepal, and our portfolio companies will need it, and so do many companies in Nepal. And finally, in education, as I've already said, we're going to continue our portfolio in expanding private schools. But we also need management skills. And I'm honoured to have a team which includes people like Michael Hay from London Business School, who is over there on our advisory board. And he has founded Business Bridge and Global Entrepreneurship Monitor. Business Bridge is providing modular international MBA quality training for entrepreneurs in the developing world. And they have very successful programs in Africa and in India. And will be expanding with us into Nepal for the good of the general market, but as well as, of course, our portfolio companies. Michael also started the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor program, which has grown into the largest annual study of global entrepreneurship activity in the world. And we will get Nepal on the map, which will be an excellent policy guide as the country develops its foreign direct investment policy and what it's doing internally with entrepreneurship and SME growth. On the other side is Rameshwar Prasad Kanal, which the Nepali gentlemen and ladies amongst you I'm sure will know. He was the Finance Secretary of Nepal and is a board member of the Dolma Impact Fund. But as well as his career, which I will explain a little more later, he is a professor, and his passion is management, especially in Nepal and India. And he is working with myself and Michael to bring these programs into the South Asian Institute of Management and really create more of a managerial, entrepreneurial ecosystem with the expertise from the West. But also we work with Change Fusion and lots of grassroots groups which are springing up to help support the social entrepreneurs in the economy. It's a boring slide, but I couldn't launch a fund in Nepal without talking about risk. Obviously, we strip out as much risk as we can from the transaction through liquidity preferences, stage milestone distribution of funds, etc. But there's not much we can do about the macro-political risk. But I need to address that. But I actually think that the ambassador addressed it very well by talking about the new legislation, the sanctity of private investment and private property. The Nepal Investment Board, which has hired a very respected banker, not a politician, as its CEO, while the Prime Minister is the chairman, bringing it close to the very top. And it strips out so many risks. It strips out licensing risk, corruption risk. And because we now have a one-stop shop that we can go to instead of traipsing around the different ministries for different licenses. There's a risk of repatriation denial, for example, if we successfully exited a company. Again, the Nepal Investment Board helps to take all that away. And the currency risk is the only other one I'll mention. It's one of the best features of Nepal. Currency is pegged, has been so since 1992, and given the heavy World Bank and IMF support of the economy, that is very unlikely to change. So you've pretty much stripped out, if you can accept the risk of the Indian rupee, you can accept the risk of the Nepali rupee. And really, just to finish off, to talk a little bit about the team. Now, if you go to the Dolma Development Fund website, you'll see a list of people which is far longer than this. What I'm going to explain are the people that will join specifically the Dolma Impact Fund structure. And obviously myself, the chairman and the founder, in fact I will become the CEO, and we are recruiting a new chairman. But I don't need to talk about my background. I think you can read it all there. You can talk to me afterwards. David, I think, has explained his background, and it's all there. I will touch on Rameshwar, who first of all is a gentleman. He has the most amazing CV. He was the finance secretary of Nepal, but he was also on the main board of the Nepal Rashtra Bank, which is the central bank, as well as some of the largest companies, Nepal Telecom, Nepal Airlines, etc. And I've already explained his passion. He was also the alternate governor for Nepal for the World Bank and ADB, and is an extremely able and dedicated director. Our advisory board, we have more than this, but I've just selected a few. First of all, I'm honoured that Ian Taylor is joining us. Ian is a friend of mine, and we've worked together on many projects. He was the Science and Technology Minister in the UK and also a parliamentarian for 23 years, and is now just enjoying his life, aren't you, Ian, since 2010, since the last election. Ian is critical, not just because of his alignment with major technology companies, which can help bring them into the market of Nepal, but also for our relationship with the British government, both at the highest levels and on the ground in Nepal, and he's helped to create those connections for us. Professor Michael Hay, I've talked about his programs, but really he is one of the leading global entrepreneurship professors in the world, as you can see from his programs, and dedicated to the study and application of entrepreneurship, not just in the developed world, but increasingly in the developing world. And Narayanan is the founder of Pragati Fund, which has raised, this is actually out of date, 70 million now from CDC and IFC combined, to focus on the 8 poorest states in India. His fund is almost identical in structure, in objective to ours, and I learn immense amounts, not just in the fundraising, but also in his knowledge, their knowledge of how business is done in the bordering states, which of course we want to address. So that alliance is very important. And the management team, as well as myself, has Carla Casper, who is standing at the back, who is a wonderfully experienced, 15 years of experience at some of the world's largest financial names, but particularly expert in emerging markets. At the bottom, Boris, a CTO, is critical. He's actually a rural poverty alleviation through technology expert, that was a mouthful, and was at MIT Media Labs and did an incredible project in India, and he advises us on how to get this technology out. But the people I really want to focus on are not necessarily the big names. They're the guys on the ground in Nepal, Shabda and Tsiring, because these are our role models and the role models for Nepal. As you walk through Kathmandu, you see endless signs saying, get your visa for Australia here, study in Britain, get out, is what it's really saying. And I find that so sad with the brain drain. And what we have are 2 people. Shabda got his economics bachelor's and MBA from the US and decided to move back and work for the Dolma Development Fund, the Dolma Impact Fund. Tsiring is a local villager from that Tibetan region I just showed you. and a remarkable entrepreneur in himself. He now heads up Dolma ecotourism, became before that one of the most respected trek leaders in Nepal, and continues to serve his community and to give back. These are the kind of role models, just like Kamu to become a doctor, that we want to have so that less people move out from Nepal and more people move back in, just like India has seen the incredible rise of the NRI coming back into the country. And really, that leaves me to talk about the only other member of the team, really, which I introduced to you earlier, and that's Dolma. Because she continues to inspire us with her smiles and hard work. And this is her starting school in 2003, and this is her last year. And she's doing fantastically well. She's going to graduate next year, and you are all invited to a trip run by Dolma Ecotourism to celebrate the Dolma Development Fund's 10-year anniversary and to join Dolma at her graduation celebration at school. And so she remains an inspiration to us. And really that's all from me, except to say that with any fundraising, of course, I need to disclose any material interests, any related party transactions, which I really should do because, you know, one related party transaction is my wife, who is Nepali, of course. Now, she gives me far more insight into the country, and her in-laws certainly do, than any World Bank report possibly ever could. And so I think it's only fair that I should disclose what I consider a major advantage to setting up this fund. But I also do have two material interests in the future of Nepal. And here they are. I couldn't resist it. I couldn't resist it. Now, these are my sons, Daniel and Benjamin, and obviously they're 50% Nepali, and it is our wish, our sincere wish, that they grow up to know a country where prosperity features greater than poverty. And with that, I will leave you. And actually, we can open to any questions, but thank you very much indeed. Now, incidentally, for the questions, there is a gentleman there with a boom mic, which is going to hover menacingly over your head. So if you could just say your name and company, perhaps, and the question.
Tim, Peter.
Hello, Peter.
You know who I am. How big is the fund targeted to be?
So we would close at 20 million. We have a maximum cap of 40 million. We think that's the maximum that we can deploy productively for the first fund. It is, as David mentioned earlier, it is Dolma Impact Fund 1. We obviously have ambitions before that. I think we need to keep our ambitions fairly small, but that's the target. Okay. Yes.
Peter Hinton, Summit Development Group, based in Botswana, focusing on SMEs there. In terms of the percentage of carry that you'll put into the charitable arm, can you tell us what that percentage is?
It's, yeah.
And what the structure of the fund is? Are you 2 and 80 or 3 and 70, or what are you?
I think if it's all right, what I'd like to do is not talk about terms here. I think what I'd like to do is encourage you all to download. I'm going to show you a place to download the document which has most of those terms in it. But what it doesn't have is it hasn't nailed down the percentage which would go in. It has nailed down, you know, what the fund structure is, what the management fee structure is, both in terms of carry and basic fee. So that's all in the pack, and anybody interested in investing, I don't want to get into a negotiation here. But in terms of the, obviously as we add LPs, we need to negotiate a settlement for the Dolma Development Fund. I am committing to it being there, but I can't commit to the actual percentage right now. Yes, please.
Hi, Cleo Byron from Cazenove Capital. I was just wondering, you were talking about working with other NGOs and governments, and it seems like you're relying a lot on the government's facilitation, say, for business transfers. That's quite a risky, I mean, it's great to have their support, but it's also putting a lot of reliance on them if something were to go wrong, if another NGO were to come in with another project similar. How do you see that risk, and how would you mitigate it?
It's an interesting question. I mean, if I understand the risk, what you're asking is the risk of essentially NGO competition. Is that what you're, like, if other NGOs or government agencies came along with a similar program?
With a similar idea, there's only so much the government can do, and maybe he would want to help others because obviously it's in his interest to have a lot of people helping Nepal with a lot of the similar mission. If it works as well as it seems like it will, a lot of people will want to have part.
Well, it's a very, very good point that you raise. I mean, first of all, in terms of our risk management, how we would manage that risk, it's pretty specific project. So I don't think there's much. I mean, pretty much like any competitive analysis, you would work out who's going to compete. So I think from a risk management point of view from our side, but the point you raise is absolutely fascinating because it's one I've been dealing with for a number of years, and it's the crowding out of the NGO, by the NGOs, of potentially lucrative private markets. And I see it in Nepal. I saw it, we've also done some work in Ethiopia, which I haven't talked about. I've definitely seen it in Ethiopia. In fact, I remember talking to the tourism commissioner of Ethiopia a few years ago, and it was at the time that when they re-released the Band-Aid single, the Feed the World single. So it was 20 years after the terrible famine of 1984. And I remember saying in my rather naive state, well, Mr. Commissioner, you must be very happy that people are raising money for Ethiopia. And he said, absolutely not. I cannot stand Bob Geldof. The last thing I need on the TV screens around the world is pictures of a 20-year-old famine which doesn't exist anymore. I want the tourist highlights. I want the new factories that have been built. I want our new roads. And so you get this over-enthusiastic crowding out. And it is the case in Nepal also. And you have some markets in some areas of renewables and in some other areas where subsidies are pushed so far that an impact fund or a private equity fund actually just can't compete. So we would be effectively crowded out. And I think it's worth understanding that both parties compete. Commerce competes for money, but charities compete for money. And charities often compete for money by telling the saddest story. It needs to compete. Everybody's starving, it's terrible. And it is terrible, and it's all true, and it's all good. But at the other end of the spectrum is the entrepreneur. And the entrepreneur has to tell the most positive story. It has to be Nepal, what an incredible place, beautiful mountains, hydro potential, inward investment, India. I'm standing here and telling you the positive story. I'm not telling you the sob stories. They do exist, and the NGOs do a fantastic job. But in some cases, it gets so competitive that there are so many in a particular industry that it becomes very difficult to compete in the private sector. And I think to their credit, led by Dividend, I think I mentioned in the invitation that certainly the British government has committed to 0.7% GDP aid, international development aid, which is against the trend of course, austerity, and they're taking some political backlash for that. But in order to justify that, they're moving their DFID organisation towards private sector stimulus, away from the kind of pure aid. And so the projects that we're working in are really businesses they're helping to launch rather than, I'm not fighting against charitable subsidies. And so it's a very, very interesting market as all these aid organisations try to move to the centre. And the Prime Minister, David Cameron, was appointed as chairman of the new UN Millennium Development Goals Committee, which has been seen, some of those objectives have been seen to go off track because they're not private sector stimulated sufficiently. And so, this is a raging debate at the moment, but a very valid one. Yes, please.
Tim, my name is Mans Shrestha, Britain Nepal Chamber of Commerce. You're talking about the SME, that's fine. Are you looking into the micro level, because Nepal has a great opportunity for a micro level to come up with the SME level. So have you looking into that sort of investment in the macro level? What
Sure.
do you?
It's a very good question. We would operate at a level larger than microfinance would. So our minimum investment would be $500,000 US. So in Nepali terms, these are quite large companies. I mean, they would have, probably 100 employees, could be 50, but certainly their revenue and their valuation would have to be high enough to be able to take an investment like that. The microfinance industry in Nepal is growing actually there are microfinance funds in Nepal. If this was a microfinance presentation, it would be a much healthier picture. And so at the grassroots, a gentleman called Graham Wrigley, who many of you probably know, is working on setting up a microfinance fund there. I think there are lots of opportunities. I was at a round table with quite a few people in this room yesterday about microfinance, not in Nepal specifically. So it is a growing market, but no, a microfinance loan might be $5,000, but ours would be quite a magnitude greater than that. I think we need to focus, otherwise, first of all, I'm not a microfinance expert, it's a very specific area. I'm more of an SME investor, and it's where my skills lie, but the microfinance business is doing very well in Nepal.
Paul Skeeler from True Star Impact Investment.
What's your exit strategy and what's your simple basis of valuation?
Okay. Exit strategy in 2 words is India and China. It's not the Nepal Stock Exchange. That really consists of just large institutions, it's banks and energy companies. So what we're doing is contacting knowing a lot more about the pipelines, the companies which are investing from India and China, and starting to line that up. Of course, that's our proactive way. Of course, as Nepal grows with inward investment, there will be more countries investing. But I think with the kind of investments which are coming in now and that kind of growth rate of 50% a year, by the time we come to exit, there will be a lot of interest in Nepal. So primarily that, that's, and I'm sorry, what was the other question?
The basis of valuation.
Okay.
As you go along, presumably.
Yes, in what regard? The methodology or?
Yes. So simply, what sort of basis would you use for indicating to investors how the fund is progressing on an annual basis?
Sure. I mean, it will be, normal metrics, but the problem is, of course, getting benchmarks. So it's going to be pretty difficult. We're going to be, back to discounted cash flows. It's going to be pretty hard to get benchmarks. But we had the same discussion yesterday about people raising microfinance funds and how there was basically only one which had seen through from investment to cash out, because these things are new. And it's similar with impact funds. It's very difficult for me to give either valuation methodology or certainly even the figures itself. So it's going to be through comparables. Those comparables are probably not going to come from Nepal. They're probably going to come from India. That's the most likely. And so where our relationship with Pragati is so important, they're the closest market I can think of. They are ethnically the same. They have the same kind of businesses, the same kind of objectives. So we'll work closely with our colleagues in the other funds in the similar regions to try to get benchmarks. It's a inexact science, as valuation genuinely is, but especially in this case. Yes, please.
Team, first of all, I think I'm really thankful for what you have done in this 10 years or
9 years. Next year it'll be 10.
Years. By the way, my name is Raja Giri, and I've been around in the UK for the last 10-12 years. What he just showed me, obviously this is from the British side now and from the Nepali person side. I've been also sort of like doing most of the things that he has explained there. I come from a tourism background, and I think you saw some of the publication around here. I'm the publisher and the editor of the magazine. And tourism obviously is one of the areas that I've been working for almost 15 years now. But obviously from UK, looking back, Nepal, that part of the world. We cover India, China, Tibet, and partly Bhutan and Sikkim, the northern side. And the other areas that I think I mentioned you in the email also is the small financial institution we have. It's the first Nepalese business. Basically, it's a remittance company we started with because we have almost 150,000 Nepalese living in the UK at the moment. They comprise of various Gurkhas, small business people, and so on. And the idea that I brought up was because a lot of money used to be sent through various ways, which we call, obviously this is, in India it's called Hawala. Hundi. In Nepal it's called Hundi, which you are familiar with. So I've been involved with this finance, it's called Samsara UK by the way, samsarafinance.com. I've got about 7,000 Nepalese people now who work with, obviously through us. It's something that started with a very minimum, sort of like I didn't know it's going to work because the majority of people that live in the UK don't even knew how to send money. So the picture had changed now. My question basically is for you is, because you mentioned both tourism and SME or banking, whatever, would your company or your foundation be interested to work with another institution which has similar interest? Because I think your interest is, the way I see, is not really money here, although there is money because the investors want return. Because the way I have got is, we have got plenty of money around. I've got 7,000 Nepalese people sending almost £1,000 a month. Mm-hmm. So you can calculate that into months, it's about 40 million in a month we directly transfer to Nepal. And like you said, it's all gone in various personal use and really unproductive places. And we are trying here to found a method where we could put these people to function or to penetrate the money to the areas that can generate or multiple effect. So I'm actually interested here. The reason I came here tonight is whether you will be interested to work or your team, because you have mentioned their Mauritius or other areas. Will they be based in UK or you're
in Kathmandu?
In Kathmandu,
Yep.
Okay.
But there may be people here.
Right.
What you just said is very interesting. We should take it offline. I'm interested in, first of all, working in ecotourism, how we can expand Dolma ecotourism. We're also looking at a couple of other projects to invest in. So how can we work together on that? I think what you just said is how can we use remittances as some sort of pool of an investment fund. My CFO at the back, who is FSA regulated, will have a fit at this point,
right,
thinking this is retail investors. But you know, certainly an interesting concept if we can get the regulatory wrapping around that.
Yes.
So we should definitely talk about that. That's very interesting. Thank you. Okay, anybody else? In that case, I will close, and I must say the timing is impeccable because it's 8 o'clock. I just would like to talk through, just before you get that chicken tikka and whatever else is on the menu, how you could participate in the Dolma project in general. The first, of course, I welcome your money. That's the main point. And if you'd like more information, there is an executive summary. There's also an open letter from the Nepal Investment Board and the Nepal government to all our prospective investors, setting out the guarantees and the legislation that Nepal is doing and the support which is providing to the Dolma Impact Fund. And there are various other bits of information now. We use a portal called Impact Partners, which is part of the Impact Investment Exchange, who are launching the first Asian social stock exchange in Singapore this year. And they also have an entity called Shujog, which is worth anybody in the impact community looking at, which provides metrics and measurement and reporting on the various impact social and environmental standards. So I think they're some of the thought leaders, certainly in Asia. Is Pradeep here from Social Stock Exchange? I think he was going to come. No. There's a similar effort in the UK to launch a social stock exchange. So obviously investment. For that, download the stuff. Any issues, email me direct. Obviously talk to me afterwards. I'm in the UK until next Thursday morning. So I'm available to meet, to talk in more detail about terms, etc., and how this can work. But beyond investment, we are also looking for pipeline, especially Nepali people who know of businesses that need growth capital. We're very interested in talking to them. Foreign companies who are looking for access to the market, perhaps through our portfolio companies or where we could help them come into Nepal. NGOs or government agencies which are working on programs which are synergistic with what we're doing. Please do let me know. Please get in touch. And finally, donations and ecotourism. If anybody would like to talk to the Dolma Development Fund about donations, about sponsoring a child, for example, or about joining one of our trips, especially our 10-year anniversary trip to meet Dolma, Ashley, if you could stand up at the back, is one of the trustees from the Dolma Development Fund. He works at the Salvation Army and will be more than happy to talk to you about that. So that is officially all from me, and we've tried to add this authentic Nepali tinge. I would just like to thank, before I go, the London Business School, who in many, not just for giving me an MBA 10 years ago, but for in many guises has many of its branches supported both this this event and the fund particularly. Not just Michael, and I think there are other faculty in the audience, but also there are some students. I've had ongoing talks with faculty. The Collar Institute of Private Equity is a leading research institution as part of London Business School, and the Venture Capital Club. It's really been an incredible effort, so I would like to thank them. You will see people with badges that say London Business School on them, or London Business School and the Dolma Impact Fund. LBS is launching its own impact fund, of which two of the people here, Vasela and Eva at the back. So if you're interested in participating in the London Business School Impact Investment Fund, they would be delighted to talk to you. So everybody, thank you very much. By the way, it said 8:30 finish, but I understand the ambassador might let us stay a little bit longer if there's enough wine and food to keep us going. So please enjoy the evening, and thank you very much indeed.